Jesus often taught using stories. These stories were not just simple tales, they were deep. They made people think. One day, a very smart man, a lawyer, came to Jesus. He wanted to test Jesus. He asked a big question. "Teacher," he said, "what must I do to inherit eternal life?" Jesus, in his wise way, turned the question back to him. He asked what was written in the law. The lawyer knew the answer. He said to love God with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind. And he added, to love your neighbor as yourself. Jesus told him he was right, but the lawyer wasn't finished. He wanted to make himself look good. He wanted to define who his neighbor was. Perhaps he thought neighbor meant only people like him, people from his own town, his own religion, his own social circle. So he asked Jesus another question, a seemingly simple one yet profound. "And who is my neighbor?" he pressed. This question set the stage for one of the most famous stories Jesus ever told. A story that still challenges us today. A story that asks us to look beyond our comfortable circles. Jesus didn't give a direct definition. He didn't list who qualified as a neighbor. Instead, he told a story. A story about a journey, a dangerous road, a man in desperate need. This road from Jerusalem down to Jericho was known for its dangers. It was steep, winding, and often frequented by robbers. Travelers knew they had to be careful. They often journeyed in groups for safety. This setting itself creates a sense of vulnerability. It's a place where things can go wrong very quickly. A place where help might be far away. The story begins with a man going down this perilous road. As feared, he fell into the hands of robbers. They didn't just take his money. They stripped him of his clothes. They beat him brutally. They left him half dead on the side of the road. Imagine him there, alone, bleeding, helpless. He was completely at the mercy of anyone who might pass by. This man represents anyone in deep trouble, anyone who is vulnerable and suffering. His situation was dire, a matter of life and death. His identity, his background, his beliefs, none of that mattered in that moment. He was simply a human being in desperate need of help. As the wounded man lay there, suffering, someone came along. It was a priest, a religious leader, someone you would expect to help. He was a man who served in the temple, who taught God's laws. Surely he would stop. Surely he would show compassion. The story says he saw the man, he didn't miss him, he noticed his plight, but then, what did he do? He passed by on the other side, he crossed the road to avoid him. Perhaps he was busy, perhaps he was afraid the robbers were still nearby. Perhaps he worried about becoming ritually unclean by touching a bleeding man. Whatever his reasons, he chose not to help. A little later, another person came down the same road. This was a Levite. He also worked in the temple. He assisted the priests. He too was a man of God, familiar with the scriptures about mercy and kindness. When he reached the spot where the injured man lay, he also saw him. He looked at him, and then he too passed by on the other side. He made the same choice as the priest. Two religious men, two people who should have known better, saw the suffering and walked away. Their actions speak volumes. They saw human need, but their religious duties, or perhaps their personal fears or discomfort, took precedence over immediate, practical compassion. Think about their reasons. Maybe they thought it was a trap. Maybe they felt it wasn't their responsibility. Maybe they were late for something important in Jericho. We can imagine all sorts of excuses, but the story doesn't focus on their excuses, it simply states their actions. They saw, they passed by. This is a powerful reminder. It's easy to see suffering, it's much harder to stop and do something about it. Their inaction is a stark contrast to what happens next. It highlights how easy it is for even well-intentioned people to fail in moments of critical need. The man on the ground was now in an even more desperate state. Two people who should have represented God's love and care had ignored him. His hope must have been fading. He was still alone, still injured, still vulnerable. The sun was likely beating down. His wounds were untreated. The story paints a vivid picture of neglect. It challenges the listeners, then and now, to think about who truly embodies the spirit of God's law. Is it those who hold religious titles, or those whose actions demonstrate love regardless of their background or status in society? The tension builds as we wait to see if anyone will show mercy. Then, a third traveler came along. This man was a Samaritan. Now, this is where the story takes a shocking turn for Jesus' original audience. Jews and Samaritans in those days had a deep, long-standing hatred for each other. They disagreed on religious practices, they avoided contact, they considered each other enemies, outsiders, people to be scorned. For a Jew listening to this story, a Samaritan was the last person they would expect to be the hero. They might have expected him to ignore the beaten man, or even worse, to mock him or add to his suffering. But this Samaritan did something completely unexpected. When he saw the man, he didn't just glance and walk away. The story says he took pity on him. He felt compassion. His heart was moved. This feeling wasn't just a fleeting emotion, it led to action. He didn't care that the man was likely a Jew, someone who might have despised him under normal circumstances. He saw a fellow human being in terrible need. He saw past the labels, past the hatred, past the cultural divides. He saw a person who was suffering, and his immediate response was to help. The Samaritan's actions were thorough and generous. He went to the injured man. He knelt beside him. He poured oil and wine on his wounds, common remedies of the time. The oil would soothe the pain, and the wine would act as an antiseptic to clean the wounds. He bandaged him carefully. Then he didn't just leave him there. He lifted the man onto his own donkey. This meant the Samaritan himself would have to walk. He took him to an inn, a place of safety and rest. He didn't just drop him off. He stayed and took care of him through the night. The next day the Samaritan had to continue his journey, but his care didn't end there. He took out 2 denarii, which was about 2 days' wages, a significant amount of money. He gave it to the innkeeper. He said, "Look after him, and when I return I will reimburse you for any extra expense you may have." He promised to cover all the costs. This wasn't a small act of kindness. It was a significant sacrifice of his time, his energy, his resources, and even his own safety and comfort. He went far beyond what anyone might have expected, especially given the circumstances of their differing backgrounds. After telling this powerful story, Jesus turned back to the lawyer. He asked him, "Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers?" The lawyer, perhaps humbled, perhaps a little uncomfortable, couldn't bring himself to say the Samaritan. Instead he replied, "The one who had mercy on him." He recognized the truth. Jesus then gave a simple, direct command, "Go and do likewise." This command wasn't just for the lawyer, it's for all of us across all time. It's a call to action, a call to live out the meaning of being a neighbor. In our world today, who are the people beaten and left on the road? They might not always be physically injured. They might be people who are lonely, forgotten, or struggling with poverty. They might be refugees far from home, or neighbors who are sick and need a helping hand. They could be colleagues facing a hard time, or strangers we pass on the street who look lost or distressed. The road to Jericho can be found anywhere, in our schools, our workplaces, our communities, even within our own families. The opportunities to be a neighbor are all around us, every single day. Being a neighbor doesn't always require grand gestures or large sums of money like the Samaritan offered. Sometimes it's the small acts of kindness that make the biggest difference. It can be a listening ear for someone who is grieving. It can be a warm meal for a family that is struggling. It can be a word of encouragement to someone who feels defeated. It can be standing up for someone who is being treated unfairly. These actions, like the Samaritan's, come from a heart moved by compassion. They are choices we make to step out of our own comfort zones and meet the needs of others. The parable of the Good Samaritan teaches us a timeless truth. True neighborliness isn't about who lives next door, or who shares our beliefs, or who looks like us. It's about who needs our help. It's about recognizing our shared humanity. Love and compassion must cross all boundaries: cultural, religious, social, and political. When we choose to act with mercy, like the Samaritan, we are not just helping another person. We are building a better world, one act of kindness at a time. We are showing what it truly means to love our neighbor as ourselves, just as Jesus taught.